Today on Pilot's Discretion, we're joined by Natalie Kelley of flyGIRL. She tells us about pursuing her flying dream later in life, her advice for women considering a career in aviation, and why warbirds are so important for aviation's future. Pilot's Discretion starts right now. Welcome, pilots. I'm your host, John Zimmerman of Sporties, and today I'm joined by Natalie Kelley. She's a flight instructor and citation pilot, but she's also the founder of flyGIRL, an organization that supports women in aviation through scholarships and mentoring. She also hosts the Cockpits and Cocktails podcast, a name that should make all other aviation podcast hosts, including me, very jealous. So, Natalie, welcome to Pilot's Discretion.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm great.
Thank you for inviting me on here, by the way.
Thanks for being on the show. We have lots of questions, as always. And I wanted to start with your bucket list, because a lot of people talk about bucket lists, they joke about them. But you actually wrote one down in 1999, which included, not surprisingly, learning to fly.
Yeah.
Tell me about that process and sort of how you got up the nerve to actually take that on and not just joke about it.
Wow. Well, that's kind of an emotional question whenever I think about it. And that is something that when I start to, that moment in my life when I pulled out that bucket list was pretty difficult personally in my personal life. So I do get emotional, as I'm doing right now. But my husband and I sat down and wrote a bucket list. It was just something that he and I were talking about, our dreams and goals when we first got married. And earning my private pilot's license was on there because my dad was a pilot and then my uncle was a pilot. And I knew it was something that I always loved. And I loved the idea of being a pilot. I loved what it meant for them, and I wanted a little piece of that. I don't think I ever thought it would be a career, and I wasn't really sure when it was going to happen. But thankfully, I wrote it down on a list of about 20 different things. And one day when I was kind of in this pit of despair, I pulled it out. It was in a scrapbook. And, back when we had scrapbooks and photo albums and all that, I knew where it was and went and pulled it out. And it was kind of an affirmation for me to go through everything and see what had been accomplished, what we had achieved. And because I was feeling pretty down at that point and saw all these things and was checking it off. And I was like, this is awesome. This is great, And then it was like that private pilot's license thing just like jumped off the page at me. It was like in bold. And for some reason, I just knew that this was the time to do it. And at the time in my life, my kids were a little bit older because I had been a stay-at-home mom for nearly 20 years and knew that my kids, didn't need me one-on-one all the time. They were in school, and financially, we were able to afford flying lessons because, as you know, it's not cheap. It's an expensive endeavor to start flight training and just to continue that hobby. And I really called that day. And I knew Sporties because who didn't know Sporties in Cincinnati? That was the place to go. I had a few pilot friends that had asked their opinion about where to go, and they all said Sporties. And I called and I talked to Charlie Masters that day and made the first introductory flight or discovery flight, I guess you call it. And I was so nervous. And I think it was like 2 weeks later that the actual flight was scheduled for. And I remember going to the flight, and I really did do like these, like walk to the door, turn around, and I was like, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? And I feel like I'm just going to look silly. I'm going to, I'm like mid-40s, and I knew there were going to be a bunch of young people in there, a bunch of men, probably not any moms walking in. And for some reason, there was just something that just told me I just have to do this. I have to do it. I have to, or I'm going to regret it for the rest of my life if I don't. And once I took that first flight with my instructor, then I was hooked. And I knew this was what I needed to do.
So what's your advice for someone in your shoes, maybe later in life, they've thought about it but never done anything about that? Is it just to get started, or is there something you wish you knew back then that you know now about starting that journey of flight training?
I knew, and I try to tell people because people, I talk to people on social media and stuff all the time about how to just do that first thing. And that's the hardest step, is taking the first step. It's very intimidating. If there's any interest or desire whatsoever, I say you've got to push through that fear. You've got to just give it a try. And it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be scary. It's going to be awkward. But you'll regret it if you don't. And if you hate it, then you don't go back. But you've got to at least try. If there's some kind of inkling of a desire to do it, then what do you have to lose?
So what did you learn about yourself throughout that process? Obviously, you learned about flying and all the lessons there, but I'm always struck the personal lessons you learn about yourself that aviation seems to draw out. So what did you learn throughout that process?
I learned that I was smarter than I thought I was. And capable of a lot more than I thought I was. I thought you really needed to be, and I'm not saying pilots aren't smart, but I thought you really needed to be super smart, really good at math and science, and I always felt like that was something that were not my strong subjects in school. So that was something that kind of pushed me back to start flight training as well. But once I started, it was like, wow, I can do this. I want other women to know they can do it. If you have the desire to do it. I mean, it's hard work. At times you're studying things that aren't always easy to grasp, but you study. And one of the harder things, I guess, would be just getting back to studying. I had not been in college for 20 years or so, and remembering how to actually develop study habits and sit down and mark the time, especially when you have a family. It was literally like on my calendar, 2-hour blocks where I would study and not do anything else for my kids. It was like, shut the door, I'm busy. You have to really do that. At least I did. I had to have that structure in order to really grasp everything. And I wanted to know the stuff thoroughly, not just kind of barely skirt by.
So obviously one challenge you overcame was that fear of, as you mentioned, here's a middle-aged person and there's young people. The other one, there's a bunch of men in there. I'm a woman, I'm a mom. I don't feel comfortable. And that's something traditionally, general aviation hasn't had a great reputation for, right? It's, 90% plus male and seems like it has been forever. But I know that's something you're trying to change with flyGIRL. Are we getting any better as an industry? Do you see progress there, or are we still pretty far behind?
I think we're getting better. And I don't think it's something that men necessarily intentionally have set out to keep women out of aviation. I feel like it's probably because women typically are the caregivers at home. And if your husband's going to be traveling at all, then you need to be the person that's going to stay home. So when you're looking for a career, you're usually thinking about something where you can have, a stable home environment. And I don't think, part of me when I walked into that school, I thought, so wait, maybe I don't like it and maybe I don't do well. So what? I think with age, you get to a point where you're just like, I don't really care. I don't know these people. They have no effect on my life whatsoever. So as you get older, I wish younger people, and I was in Phoenix recently telling a young group of women in aviation, like, I wish you could think like a 50-year-old woman and not care what everybody else thought and just do it. I mean, this is your life. These people have nothing to do with how it turns out. You've got to take it, and do what you want to with it.
That's great
Your
advice.
question, I don't think I actually answered. What was it again?
Just
women. Okay.
What the industry?
Yeah.
Are we as an industry getting better? Do you see signs of progress?
I do. On Instagram and social media, that's where I am really seeing a lot of support for women there. And maybe because of social media, more women can see what other women are doing in aviation. It's out there more so than what we used to. The exposure we used to have is definitely, if you're looking for it, you can find people in just about any field in aviation or anything else.
If there's a male pilot listening to this podcast that wants to do something, maybe even just small, what's your advice to a typical male pilot hanging around a flight school and airport? What could they do that would help?
Encourage women to fly. There were times when I was around my uncle flying, men, it seemed, didn't really think that a woman would be interested in flying. And they may turn to a little boy and then there's a little girl there, but they're going to turn to the little boy and say, "Wouldn't you like to be a pilot?" And not necessarily to the girl. And I don't know, this is just something that's gone on for years and years, and they don't even really probably know that they do it. But just think of any opportunity you'd think that you would offer to a little boy, offer it to a little girl as well. I mean, they may not be interested, but just open their eyes. I wish earlier I had started flying. I didn't know that it was something really that I could turn into a career and have a family and do all that. Give a little girl just the opportunity to wish it and dream about it and think if that's going to be something that she would be interested in, that it's something available to her just like it is to a little boy.
That's obviously something you're doing with flyGIRL and the work you do. You do a lot with scholarships. And one of the things I've been struck by is your work with the scholarship winners is not just a check and congratulations. You really get to know these people. What have you learned from some of those scholarship winners that you've gotten to know over the years?
I have learned, well, I do really like relationships with them. I do feel like if you pour into someone, then they're more likely to give back to someone else. If you can not just hand a check over, if I'm really interested in them, and I am, sincerely, I'm not just saying that. I want to see where they're going. I don't push them to go in any one direction. I'm not like, "Oh, you should go to the airlines." I don't tell them what they need to do. But you need someone, for a female, because I'm a female, I know kind of what females need, someone that cares and someone that's there emotionally and can let them know, some days are not going to be very fun and flying and training and it's going to be hard, but that doesn't mean you can't do it. That's normal and it's okay. And if I'm telling them those things, I feel like they're more likely when someone else comes along that's going through training to do the same thing and encourage them as well. So I just feel like, I guess, what do you say, the pay it forward thing, if we just can encourage each other. And women, typically are not that supportive of other women. But I have found in aviation, I think because there are a lot of struggles and it is kind of a more male-biased atmosphere, then women are supporting more women in aviation because we need that in order to get through. And I think we all know that that's what we need.
Natalie, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be back with some more questions.
Awesome.
Shop the latest flyGIRL products at Sporty's and show the world you love aviation. From hats and t-shirts to flight bags and beach towels, there's something for every type of pilot, and every item features the flyGIRL logo. Plus, a portion of every sale goes to support the flyGIRL Scholarship Program, so you're helping to encourage the next generation of aviators. Visit sporties.com/flygirl to see the complete collection. Now, back to Pilot's Discretion.
Natalie, you're now doing some flying as a corporate pilot. What's your advice for landing the job in that world, or for somebody who's just somewhat interested in that? What's a good way to sort of get interested and hang around that industry?
I think it's all about networking and knowing people. And I know a lot of the younger people, I feel like, have a harder time with that. Maybe because of with age, like we mentioned before, you just get a little more confident, or you just get a little more to the point where you don't really care if people, if you look funny or if you're super outgoing or something like that. People think I'm really outgoing and I'm really not. I'm really introverted, but I know I am interested in aviation and I'm interested in what people have to say about it. And I'm interested in learning from anyone in aviation. And I know that there's a lot of people that know a lot more than I do. And in order for me to learn from them, I need to get to know them and I need to seek them out. And they are very often very helpful. They're not typically going to shut me down. They're, people in aviation, pilots, what's the joke where if you want to know if there's someone in the room that's a pilot, they're going to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
We're happy to share our aviation knowledge, and we want people to be good pilots, and we want people to keep pursuing what they have the desire to do in aviation. With corporate training or corporate pilot career, I think my situation is different. I've known people for a while in aviation. Before I even got into aviation, I knew people and always kept those conversations going with them, seeking advice from them. I really didn't know where it was going to go. I just wanted to have their knowledge, and any questions, if there was any interest, then I would go to them and ask them, what's it like to be a corporate pilot? What's it like in Cincinnati? Is that something, that would fit my lifestyle? And what I actually did was probably different than a lot of younger people do. I actually paid for my type ratings myself. I knew a couple of aviation management companies that wanted contract pilots, and I wanted to be a contract pilot. I didn't want to be tied to an organization where they were paying for my type rating and then I was contracted with them for 2 years or whatever. I like to have a lot of flexibility. I still have a high schooler at home, but I wanted to fly jets. So I did the type rating myself, 2 different jets, and I'm able to fly kind of as much as I want, pick and choose the contract opportunities. That works for me. I know it may not work for a younger person who, really needs a career and is building a career. For that younger person, I would say, it's hard to say because I know they don't have time to hang out at airports. Don't ever lose any kind of contact you make in aviation, whether it's your CFI, the manager of your flight school. Let them know you're interested in just anything, and anything they can give you, any knowledge that they have, any connection they have. You never know when those paths will cross and the right opportunity will come along or a door will open. And don't have blinders on either, and just focus on, I just need to be an airline pilot. Because there are so many different things that you can do that may be a better fit for you. Keep asking questions with all the contacts you have in aviation, and be open to opportunities that you may not have thought of before.
I think that's great advice. I think so much career advice often goes strictly to airline, which is sort of a different flow in terms of how you get connected with maybe a track and a recruiter. But I think, that corporate world is a lot more relationships and, like you said, networking. They care about those interpersonal skills, not just the flying skills. So whether it's, I know people who have gotten hired as corporate pilots because they washed the airplanes and were hanging around the hangar, or because they had a flight student who worked for a company that had a flight department. Like you said, you just never know where some of those connections might end up. So
and I want to say, when I say, don't selfishly try to, give a little bit too. There were some people that I knew that run aviation companies that I actually, referred some pilots that I knew would be a good fit for them. Really, just because I wanted to help them. I really didn't know I could be flying for them in the future. Don't just be doing things for people just to serve yourself, because it's probably in the long run, it's going to come back to hurt you, and people are going to think, well, they just want to take. That's not someone that we really want in our organization. It's a give and take, and make it mutually beneficial for both of you.
What's your pitch for the corporate pilot world? If somebody's been down the track of, I'm going to be an airline pilot, what would you tell them to maybe pause for a second and consider? What are the pros and cons from your standpoint?
What I love about corporate aviation is the family kind of atmosphere you get in a lot of the organizations. A lot of the pilots know the families and the businesses. You're just working with a small group of people, all the time. It's not strangers. You get to know them. You get to know their families. They treat you well. You treat them well. It's more of a relationship type experience, and that's what I love about it.
So speaking of relationships, you've written a few times about flying with your uncle as a kid, and you mentioned it earlier today, and how important that really was for at least planting the seed of interest in aviation. Do you think we underestimate the value of mentors like that in aviation, even unofficial, if you don't even think of him as a mentor at the time? I mean, it sounds like that was very important for your early development as a pilot.
Very much so, and I don't think he really knew at the time, He just loved flying, and he liked taking me and exposing me to it because I loved it as well. I think, I have college-age kids, And I would say college-age children or kids, young adults, whatever, don't necessarily know how important it is to have that personal, especially now we got iPhones with people text. We don't actually talk one-on-one, face-to-face anymore. I mean, you got to talk. It's like, oh my gosh, I don't know how to do that. How important that is. And you don't have to officially say, oh, you're going to be my mentor. It can just be a relationship that you have with this person and you're both helping each other out. It's just a friendship, really, that revolves around aviation. It doesn't have to be a set, we're going to meet every week. It doesn't have to be anything necessarily planned. I think for younger people, it's important to think about the relationship and building the relationship. And it's really not about just that one person. Because if that one person is really interested in you and helping you grow, and hopefully anyone that would be a mentor would be, they are going to get to know you and your personality. And things are going to click with them when they think, I have this other person that I really think that they would really get along. I think this would be a great fit. I want to introduce them. The good thing about having a mentor is that they get to know you. They're not going to put you and suggest something that's really not going to fit what your personality is or what your long-term goals are. And they can help you try to figure out what those goals are. What do you like? Do you want to be gone all the time? Do you want to be home at night? Do you really, what kind of planes do you want to fly? Is this something you want to do for a long time? Is this going to be something, there's just so many things that a mentor can help you do. I would say seek advice from people that are a little bit older or that have been in aviation longer. They're gonna have just provide all kinds of education for you and opportunities.
I know one of the things that's important to you is Warbirds, which again I think your uncle was a part of getting you exposed to early on in life. What is so important to you about Warbirds and the Warbird community?
Well, my uncle did introduce me to a lot of people in aviation. So when you think about, I never thought of him as a mentor, but he was my uncle. The connections I've made through him have opened opportunities in other aviation experiences, whatever, endeavors. That is really important to me. I think I learned so much about history through aviation. If I was just reading it out of a book, I don't think it would be quite as meaningful to me when you kind of tie in the aviation, airplanes to actually, how these things changed history. Then it becomes really, really interesting. There's so much history we don't know about. We're just learning about the WASP or the Tuskegee Airmen, things like that, that really just provide a rich history. It's not just about Nazi Germany. There's so many other things that people did and contributed that's fascinating to me. These individual, like with the WASP, these individual women that you learn about them, their families, their life. Everybody has a story, and it makes you appreciate everything about, that made what we have today possible through them. I don't know that we have enough people that can fly those types of planes. The interest and the expense of actually owning a plane like that, maintaining it, is very high. It's important, I think, to keep them flying because we don't want all that to be lost. It's such a thing that you appreciate the freedoms that we got because of people like that. And they're just passing it on. We've got to find people to pass it on and continue flying the Warbirds. And I think that's just, it's like a hands-on visual experience for someone to go and watch an air show with Warbirds and ask questions about that particular airplane, how technologically advanced it was, how quickly we built them, how all the things that we did in order to make it happen. There's just a lot of things that you can learn through the Warbird community. And the Warbird community loves history.
All right, Natalie, at the end of each of these episodes, we like to do a rapid-fire series of questions, what we call Ready to Copy. So I'll throw out some topics. You give me your quick reply. Are you ready to copy?
I think I'm more nervous about this than anything. Okay.
This test will not be graded.
Okay.
What's a skill you learned as a mother that helped you as a pilot?
Multitasking.
Excellent answer. What was a harder part of learning to fly when you did? Was it being older or being a woman? Which was a bigger obstacle, do you think?
Being older.
What was the harder rating for you? Flight instructor rating or a jet type rating?
Flight instructor.
Why is that?
Gosh. That's a good question. Well, the check ride, I don't know. Maybe I just wasn't really have a real desire to earn it and teach. Like being an instructor wasn't something that I thought I would want to do for a long, long time, but I knew I wanted to fly a jet. So the desire, it was like the outcome. I really wanted it with the jet. With the CFI, it felt more like a stepping, stone that I had to kind of had to go through.
How would you describe that first flight in a jet?
Oh, amazing. Fast.
What's your favorite Warbird? Since we're talking about Warbirds.
That is a tough one.
What makes you stop if you're walking the line at Oshkosh?
Oh, it's a tie probably between, the Mustang, the T6. I would say the T6 probably. And it's not like that glamorous one, but because it was they say if you can fly that, you can fly anything. And it's such a fundamental type trainer that I felt like so many people trained in. I would say the T6.
Another question about favorites. You've done a lot of traveling across the U.S., a lot of it in your Archer. What is one of your favorite airports from those travels that maybe not enough pilots know about?
Oh, there was a little airstrip at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. I can't remember what it was called. But I would say you flew into the bottom of the Grand Canyon, and it was wavy and wobbly. And you got out, and then you walked across the street to go and sign a book. And I don't even think there was anyone there in the little bitty cabin FBO. I'd probably say that was a very memorable flight, yeah.
You mentioned it before, the power of social media with connection, and more than most people, you seem to use it for good, which is refreshing. So what's your secret?
I need a long pause with that. My secret would be, I don't want to put anything negative out there. I think we have enough negative stuff and just coming at us all the time. I think twice before I post something, is this positive? And social media is tough because not everyone's going to like what you post. And you just have to be authentic and know that, the things I post, I'm not trying to get a reaction from someone. I'm really trying to, it's really for good. And I know that no matter what someone else thinks, I know it's for good. And I want everything to be positive because I think there's just a lot of negativity around. So
I think you do a great job of using social media to start and then helping that to create a real relationship in person too, which maybe is another step that some people lose along the way. All right, so I have a food question if you're up for it. You're from Tennessee?
Yes.
So inquiring minds want to know, Memphis ribs or Nashville hot chicken?
Memphis ribs. I'd actually never heard of Nashville hot chicken until I moved away from there.
Yeah, I'm not sure it was a thing until 10 years ago it was invented. But...
Yeah.
Our last question, always the same on pilot's discretion. You have one final flight. We want to know, what are you flying and where are you going?
A Gulf Stream, a tropical island.
Fair answer. It's very hard to argue with that. Natalie, thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you very much. It was fun.
Thanks for listening to Pilot's Discretion, brought to you by Sporty's Pilot Shop. For more episodes and links to additional information, visit sportys.com/podcast. And if you have comments or guest ideas, email podcast@sportys.com. I'm John Zimmerman. We'll see you next time on Pilot's Discretion.